Hello and welcome all entire English-speaking auditory who is watching this video. My name is Vasyl Pekhno. I'm a Ukrainian journalist who is observing the Ukrainian battlefields for more than 3 years of full-scale Russian invasion to Ukraine. Please join to this video on updates as of June the 7th. And also like it, the video with pushing the like button under the video, comment on it, and join to our channel, subscribe to it. Let's start, let's begin. Turn your attention to the screen. I'm going to sum up the main directions now. At the moment, I would highlight 5 main directions. These are the areas where fighting is taking place, including this week as well. The first is the Sumy region. No, actually, to be more precise, the first is the Pokrovsk-Konstantinivka agglomeration. The second is near Novopavlivka, or rather the Novopavlivka direction. The third is Lyman. The fourth, actually, that's Sumy, as we've already mentioned. And the fifth, a new direction that emerged at the end of the week, is the Zaporizhzhia front. That is, the enemy has started, as was anticipated, that during the summer campaign, the Russians would try to stretch our forces as much as possible to open up as many sections of the front line as they can in order to, well, try to break through with a kind of frenzied rush with intense pressure to try to push through and break our defenses somewhere. Of course, one of the main, let's say, outcomes of the week are the events in the Sumy direction, which have been very actively discussed everywhere, basically in the media. We do, of course, have changes on the deep state map, which are still marked as the capture of Kindrativka, Oleksivka, and advances from Bilovody and from Loknia. Basically, these are the 4 locations. But in reality, as before, essentially nothing is changing here. It's not changing in the sense that the main line, in fact, where the enemy will actually be met, or where, so to speak, the defensive line or belt is located, runs from Khotin, Paizarivka, Yunakiv, Yunakiv, Kater. That's the correct emphasis. This is essentially the defensive line along the road from Sumy to Sudzha, below Khotin, and if you look at the map below Yunakivka, dense forests begin in that direction. It is precisely on the approaches to this dense forest that the Russians will mainly be stopped. The pace of their advance here has undoubtedly slowed down. And Sumy region, even though the situation here is extremely difficult, in my opinion, Sumy region serves as a kind of distracting additional auxiliary direction for the Russian military's attack, while the main fighting is taking place in Donbas. I have already repeated this more than once. I will repeat it once again. Unfortunately, we are very quickly subjected to the influence of information, to the information flow, primarily from Russian sources. So the way the Russians want us to see and perceive information is, to some extent, the way we end up following it. And we constantly discuss various information dumps. Excuse me. These are created precisely by the enemy, starting with the story about 300 boats heading to Kherson, which were supposedly going to storm the Dnipro, and then carry out an operation in the Kherson regional rumor that sparked a huge wave of discussion at the end of November last year. Continuing with the Oreshnik missile, which was used to scare everyone, then with the supposed advance toward the Dnipropetrovsk region, which everyone was talking about, and now ending with the situation in the Sumy region. I'll tell you even more. Here's a bit of a prediction for the future, for the coming week. It's quite likely that on the reactivated sectors of the Zaporizhzhia front, there will now be a new focus of attention. And once again, many people will start to panic about the idea that the Russians are about to push towards Zaporizhzhia, because indeed, enemy activity has resumed in the Zaporizhzhia direction. It has significantly increased. It still hasn't reached even the levels we're seeing in the Sumy region, so to speak. But nevertheless, the direction toward the city of Zaporizhzhia itself, along the highway, so to speak, is where the Russians want to advance. And also the Huliaipol district to the west of Velika Novosilka. Here, right here, as well at the end of this week, there was increased enemy activity, which could mean that in the future they will try to gain a foothold here in some more visible information-worthy moments, so they can highlight them using propaganda resources to showcase supposed major successes, as if they are breaking through the defenses and similar things.
I can't say that there won't be any enemy advances there, but on the Zaporizhzhia direction, the so-called Surovikin lines have really been dug in on our side. Well, yes, in quotation marks, Surovikin lines in the sense that there are quite strong fortifications here created over these years of war, in fact. So I think there shouldn't be any excessive concerns here. But the Russians are definitely putting on pressure, expanding the front as much as possible across many sectors. By the way, what else is worth mentioning? They're not pressing forward only with motorcycles. They need motorcycles in areas where there are open steppe sections and where the forests begin, where there are tree lines, where there is greenery, where they can hide from our drones using the cover of vegetation, which was expected to be a major challenge before the start of the summer. Offensive, many people said that the greenery would help the Russians advance somewhat more effectively or carry out dangerous maneuvers in our buffer zones between the two armies. And now there are actually even fewer motorcycles because it makes more sense for infantry to move through the tree lines. And in fact, this is exactly what we are observing in the Zaporizhzhia direction. This very situation, movement along the tree lines toward Komar, this is the story that has appeared on the deep state map over the past few days. It's as if there is an advance or a kind of penetration into our defenses, reaching Komar and Fedorivka, well, in the area, let's say, yes, in the Novopavlivka direction, I think that's the correct way to refer to it, or formerly the Vuhledar direction. In short, the Vuhledar group is operating here.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
If you look at the satellite images, look, I'll say right away, this situation looks frightening on the map. In reality, it's not as catastrophically frightening or complicated. Let me explain why. The logic here is that the movement along the tree lines is just the same. And here, in fact, are those very tree lines. So what I'm getting at is that if we look at the satellite image, you can clearly see the strips, the entire tree lines. I can even trace them, draw these lines along them. Here's one continuous large tree line, then continues on. Here, let's look at it this way. Here is one continuous tree line, which with a small gap transitions into another tree line, which basically leads directly to Komar itself. So the Russians use it to move when, for example, it's morning, dusk, or dark. They move along these tree lines, relocate, hide from our drones so they won't be detected, and emerge at certain points. Exactly the same kind of movement as here is happening all along the front line. Absolutely everywhere there is greenery, absolutely everywhere there are tree lines. This kind of movement is happening. I can't say that there's absolutely nothing frightening or threatening about it. But the logic of the process is that the Russians sneak in, get in somewhere, hide, hole up, as they say, and our drones simply track them. The biggest problem is to detect and destroy them in time. In this area, yes, the Russians were advancing to certain positions. As far as I know, the wedge that is now shown on the deep state map was relevant about 2 days ago. Right now, I can't say that everything there is, like that everyone has been eliminated or driven out, because that wouldn't quite reflect reality. But the enemy does not have the capability to advance. Control, no matter how cliched it may sound by our drones, is present here, just as it is on many other sections of the front. It's just, well, I don't even know how to explain it. You have to realize that if there is dense, lush greenery made up of bushes and trees, then in such a case, the Russians will indeed be able to advance somewhere along the edge of that greenery, because right now there aren't any strong positions, except for areas within these groves where infantry could sit and shoot at the occupiers for every move they make. There aren't, because we simply don't have that much infantry. And that's exactly why the Russians are advancing through the greenery somewhere where the forest ends. After all, they need to come out to stick their noses out. And that's where the annihilation begins, the destruction with the help of drones that control these groves, or rather the exits from them. That's roughly the picture. But the movement along these groves, these kinds of tails with our defense, could be drawn on the deep state map, in fact, in many locations. So what we are observing in these changes that have appeared here recently, they're not something new. No, of course, it's unpleasant. It doesn't look good, this, well, picture, this whole situation. But the answer here is different. We need to carry out more mobilization then, have more people in the role of infantry, and more people who will be holding positions. Positions that, unfortunately, the Russians are sharing with various means of destruction, from aviation to drones. And we have to be prepared that this means more people to be conscripted. They will be sitting under fire, they will be wounded, and they will be killed. But Ukraine is not ready for this. There is absolutely no sense in this at all. So that's how I would comment on these events happening in this direction. Even deep state themselves say that the enemy is simply leveling that same Fedorivka to the ground. In a way, this might even be a good thing, because by leveling it to the ground, the enemy won't get positions they can hold on to take cover. And what's the main thing in populated areas? It's the basements. It's not even the houses themselves anymore. It's the basements attached to those houses where the enemy can take cover, hide out, and survive the fire from drones, which are now actually hunting down every single infantryman on the front line. Well, I'll wrap up today's review with the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, because we can see once again these changes on the deep state map. The enemy has actually moved even closer to the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region. Our soldiers in this direction are doing everything within their power and everything possible, essentially, to hold back the enemy and prevent them from advancing. But, right now, if you stir up a new wave of information, like here, it used to be 2 kilometers, now it's 700 meters. Listen, these 700 meters or those distances, whether it's a kilometer or these 2 kilometers or 1.5 kilometers in some places, or even 4 in some other locations closer to the Dnipropetrovsk region, they were there a month ago, even 2 months ago, and they remain the same. So once again, war is not about simply preventing the enemy from reaching the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region or closing off the borders of the Donetsk region. War is about holding those areas that are advantageous and appropriate to hold. As of today, yes, the enemy is entrenched 2 kilometers from the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region. The Russians are pressing here with the assaults of 1 brigade and 2 regiments, reinforced with fresh recruits, and are trying to break through our defenses at this spot. There's no need to look for any sensational news here. There's also no need to throw ashes on your head. The situation is very, very extremely difficult because the enemy has a vastly superior number of infantry. They keep pushing forward relentlessly, without restraint, essentially having unlimited opportunities to use their infantry. And that, in fact, is exactly what's causing the problems in this sector. As soon as the infantry assigned to the current task is depleted, a new group is sent in, let's put it this way, a fresh batch of cannon fodder, and this goes on endlessly. It's happening all the time. In the future, according to Deep State, the line of contact in this sector will change. We need to be prepared for the moment when the enemy's presence will be recorded, not just at the border, but already in the Dnipropetrovsk region, because the enemy will undoubtedly break through there. So to sum up the week, to sum up this review, it's a general overview without much specific detail. The week can be described as the Russian offensive, which began a while ago. The summer offensive is primarily an assault of manpower, a massive amount of Russian human reserves, resources, and sheer numbers. This manpower needs to be destroyed. We don't have enough infantry to counter this mass of troops that is coming. Infantry and assault troops who would eliminate them in the tree lines. The greenery, the tree lines, help the enemy to advance. In some places, they will gain advantages thanks to this kind of movement. In fact, there is an ongoing exchange, a moderate trade of territory for the number of Russian soldiers' lives, because 1,000 plus enemy fighters per day, that is the pace the Ukrainian army must maintain in order to eliminate at least 30,000 Russians per month, to put their mobilization machine in a very questionable position. For those who think that the Russians are endless and that they will be mobilized forever, that they have 40 million in reserve, 140 million in reserve, that does not correspond to reality. That's not the case, because even in certain locations, in some regions of the Russian Federation, I think I'll provide this information additionally, so you can review it on my Telegram channel, Druzy. Subscribe to it. The link is in the description of this video. So in some regions, problems with payments have already started, specifically with mobilization payments, where Russians are paid from $20,000 to $25,000 for signing a contract. Problems with payments have started, and the state of the Russian economy will, start to show its effects unless of course, the Chinese send in their infantry. Otherwise, there is some tangible plan to counter this massive wave of Russian manpower. Again, I repeat, if China doesn't send in its infantry, and unfortunately, we simply can't know the answer to that question. So right now, objectively, there is a partial exchange of territory for, I'll say it again, a large number of Russian soldiers' lives. Our soldiers cannot hold the defense steadfastly at the moment because it's simply not appropriate under conditions where enemy aircraft are destroying virtually any positions we try to hold. It would come at a very high cost for us to hold, so to speak, certain positions to the last minute. Very costly in terms of the loss of our people's lives. That's the situation. I'll wrap up here and put a full stop. Thank you for your attention, friends. Take care of yourselves. All the best. And until we meet again, to this massive wave of Russian manpower. Again, I repeat, if China doesn't send in its infantry, and unfortunately, we simply can't know the answer to that question. So right now, objectively, there is a partial exchange of territory for, I'll say it again, a large number of Russian soldiers' lives. Our soldiers cannot hold the defense steadfastly at the moment because it's simply not appropriate under conditions where enemy aircraft are destroying virtually any positions we try to hold. It would come at a very high cost for us to hold, so to speak, certain positions to the last minute. Very costly in terms of the loss of our people's lives. That's the situation. I'll wrap up here and put a full stop. Thank you for your attention, friends. Take care of yourselves. All the best. And until we meet again,